the topic for this evening is chesed, kindness. And for those of you that have participated in this course so far, we've tried to do something experiential and hands-on for some of them. And this course, we have little tzedakah boxes that the people that are here are going to take to go and give some tzedakah. We're going to talk about tzedakah, but we just in the last few days have a personal story, running story that is not over yet, but it gave us really gave me a first-hand experience of the kindness of the community, and so I'll share it.
Leah,
it's again, go ahead, Deborah.
I think this Richard and Susan Crone, I don't know who they are, but I think they have to mute.
Okay, I can actually mute them. So yeah, if anyone's noisy, I just click of a button. Yep. It was in school. So when classrooms went on Zoom, it was so hard. But the one thing that teachers loved was just like mute. We just do that, and if we could do that in real, wouldn't it be great? Mute button. Mute button. Okay, so this is not in the book. This is our story. On Saturday night, my 13-year-old son came back from a friend that he had spent Shabbat at, and he brought this friend home with him, and they were going to have a sleepover. My son Shalom had slept at his friend for Shabbat, and then the friend was coming over on Saturday night to sleep over, and then they go to Sunday school together in the morning. So they were getting out of the van with their stuff, and they decided, the two 13-year-olds that don't use their full prefrontal cortex, that they were going to leave some of the stuff in the car that they needed for the next morning, because they go to Hebrew school and they pray at Hebrew school. So they left their hat and tefillin in the car, and the car was parked behind our house, and that was just one decision that two 13-year-olds made. And then my husband got out the car, and for some reason either had his hands full or something, accidentally didn't lock the car. And if you know Rabbi Ari, he's so careful with these kinds of things. Like, he locks the car 7 times a night. He double locks. I don't think it's like, he's not scared that someone's going to break into the house during the day, but he's just like, out of habit, he always like locks the front door double. I come home from school and I have to unlock 2 locks. I'm like, why are you double locking in the middle of the day? But that's just like his habits. He beeps the car like 3 times a night just to make sure. Anyway, Saturday night, doesn't lock the car. And we went out, and he came home and he said, oh, I don't remember if I locked the car. And I'm like, okay, just, lock it from inside the house. And he even said it and then just didn't pick up his keys and do it. Anyway, Sunday morning, my son goes out to the van, and because he was getting a ride with Matzik Schusterman, and he's like, comes back into the house and he's like, our hat and tefillin are not there. And I'm like, no way, exactly. Who's going to take them? No one took them. You're 13-year-olds. You either left them at your friend, or you left them at school, or you thought that you moved it from their van to our van and you already left it in their van. Like, so many different things that could have happened, because it's not the first time that he said that he lost something and then we found it.
The car was in your driveway?
The car was in our driveway. Anyway, so I sent him off, and he was like really kind of like anxious, because he's like, no, I remember. And I'm like, okay, so, I'm not panicking yet. I'm not worrying yet. They'll definitely turn up. So he went to the Hebrew school, and I searched the house, searched the car. I called the friend that he was at for Shabbos, and she searched the house, searched her car. Then I drove to school in Sandy Springs, because I was like, they're probably at school, and searched the school. And at that point, I'm like, not in the house, not in their house. Anyway. So we came home, and we just started kind of like walking around our alley, looking in dumpsters and looking behind the bushes. If someone took it, and they would just like open it and then realize that there's nothing there. They thought it's this leather purse. Right, what are these? And then just dump them somewhere. So I'm walking the alley and looking in dumpsters and looking in the bushes, and I see my neighbor. And I told her what happened, what we thought. I said, nothing else in the car was rummaged through, so I don't even think that they were stolen, but we can't find them. So she went to check her surveillance cameras, because she has, and she 5 minutes later texts me a 25-second clip of someone walking down the driveway, pushing a bicycle, stopping at my car, opening the trunk, taking stuff.
They have like a,
No, it wasn't locked.
but you can just pull it open.
You just press the button.
Actually, and I don't mean to interrupt your story, but you're lucky it wasn't locked.
Right, because then they would have broken
I- I-
it.
my window broke in.
Correct. So if they see anything in the car that, so what we know this, we live in the Highlands for 16 years. So if they see something, they'll break the window. Don't leave anything in your car. It was just like a confluence of that. Anyway. So then I posted it. It was in the trunk. So anyway, then I was like, we know it's stolen. I was really, really, really devastated. We were really devastated. And so then his tefillin was stolen.
Oh, that's not replaceable, is it?
No, I mean, you can buy a new pair, but
It's precious.
it's very precious. So I posted it. So then I posted a picture to next door, and we haven't found them, but the community, the next door community, and just the community was so supportive and so just like everybody was, we'll look around, we'll keep our eyes open. Did you look here? Did you look there? Just suggestions and so much love and support and respect for, this holy, I try to describe it a little bit. I'm like, it has no value to this person that walked off with it.
Most of the people wouldn't know what it is.
Right. I'm like,
Still.
how do I wrap this? I'm like, Ari, what do I wrap? Like, how do I explain what's a filling up? Anyway, so then on next door, somebody from CBS 46 reached out to me, and she was, so what happened? Maybe, we're thinking of doing a story. Maybe it will help you find it. So they're not found, but we did feel a lot of kindness and just love from the community. I want to actually share my screen quickly. So can you see it? Yes. So they actually they interviewed my husband today, and he got to explain a little bit about what tefillin are. So I'll just it has an article. You can read it, kind of.
A reminder to moderate impulse.
1 second. Wait, let me start from the beginning. Hold on. They did an interview at Chabad in town today. Give me a sec. I'll redo it. I'll restart it, and I'll put up the volume.
With
I look at my sheet.
Okay, people that are on Zoom, tell me if you can hear.
New at 6 and only on CBS 46, a sacred prayer item stolen from a local rabbi's son.
Yes.
Over the weekend from their Midtown neighborhood.
Well, now their family is pleading for its return. CBS 46's Crystal Bowie speaks exclusively with the family about why the item has so much meaning. Take a close look at this surveillance video. A person breaks into a car stealing something incredibly sacred in the Jewish faith.
Whoever took it thought that they got some sort of purse or bag or something with some, what we would call universal valuables inside of it. It's a Jewish ritual prayer item.
The person in the video made away with what's called tefillin, belonging to Rabbi Ari Sollish's son. They're small black leather boxes with leather straps containing scrolls of parchment inscribed with the holiest prayers from Jewish scripture.
It's a handcrafted, unique item that just can't be replicated with the push of a button.
Tefillin is used for morning prayers, typically by Orthodox Jewish men over the age of 13.
He's devastated about them being missing. His bar mitzvah was just a few months ago. So this is his pair of tefillin. And when you get your tefillin, it's like for life.
The leather boxes also hold a deeper meaning. They're a reminder to moderate impulse. And so this crime of opportunity goes against the religious value.
Whenever something gets taken, I think there's a sense of violation, of being violated. There's your property or your things are violated, let alone when it's something so holy and spiritual.
The family fears the thief, not knowing what it was, could have tossed it in the trash. And so the rabbi at Intown Jewish Academy is praying it's returned.
Hoping that someone finds them or knows something about it and can help us get it back and reunite him with these very special Jewish ritual items.
The rabbi says they just want their sacred items back, no questions asked. If you know anything or if you have the items, you can return it to the synagogue here or turn it in to the Atlanta Police Department. Reporting in Atlanta, Crystal Bowie, CBS 46 News.
Wow. Impressive. How'd that happen?
I just thought it was so kind. It was so nice of the community to be so supportive and just everyone going out of their way to help us. So that's the story. I hope
What I think is
there's an update with a happy ending. It's just been like the thought of them ending up in the trash or in the dumpster. It's heartbreaking.
they're gonna be found.
They're going to be found. Amen.
No,
okay.
I'm not saying, that's not a promise.
Right.
That's a
All right.
prophecy.
Adira says that Adira's prophesizing that they're going to be found. Amen.
I dreamt about it I dreamt about it 3 days ago.
Okay, ready, guys? Now the class is about chesed and kindness. So on that note, let's jump in. So I will share my screen again and share the PDF of the class. Give me a sec.
Should I go check to see if anyone's out there? I did not.
Yes,
take the
please.
doorbell.
That's a good idea. So today was the first, well, yesterday we didn't know what happened to them. Today was the first day. So when my husband's grandfather passed away, so they checked his tefillin and they were kosher. So Ari took them. And so we have Ari's grandfather's tefillin. So Shalom's going to use those just for the next couple days. So it's going to take a while. Look, I'm going to give it a couple more days and hope to find them. Otherwise, we'll have to order new ones.
Actually, how much
Yes.
do they cost?
There we go. They cost a few thousand, like they're about $4,000 or $5,000. If you want to know the truth, a couple $1,000.
I cannot,
It's-
I can't replace them for you. I was gonna do
You're
that.
gonna be in Brooklyn in May.
All right. If you see a GoFundMe for Shalom's tefillin, you'll understand why.
I don't think I can afford it, but if I could, I would
I'm
replace
so,
it for you.
it's devastating. Okay, so we're going to talk about kindness. And everybody that is on Zoom, you're invited to unmute yourself. If there's background noise, we know what to do. But if there isn't, then you're welcome to be part of the conversation. If you're Zoom savvy, you can just mute and unmute yourself. So we're talking about kindness and charity and kind of redefining them according to Jewish perspective. So when you think of kindness, what's the standard understanding or definition of kindness, and who wants to share what comes to mind when they think of kindness? What does kindness mean? Anyone on the screen? Anyone in person? Adira.
So kindness is doing something for another, whether or not anyone knows about it.
Okay, doing kindness for another, whether it's anonymous or not. Lovely. Any other definitions or understandings of kindness? Because of course, what we're going to do is redefine them.
Never mind.
It's returning the tefillin.
Returning the tefillin, yes, returning the tefillin would be a great kindness. So when we talk about, the typical understandings of kindness and charity, we think of things like, and they're not wrong, like Adira said, doing something for another, reacting to a need, noticing a need, sensing a need, being sensitive to a need, and then reacting to it. We talk about giving, delivering services or goods. Someone needs something, we deliver them, again, not as a delivery service, but giving somebody something that they need, and something that people, some people have money, some people do not have money, some people have more of whatever it is, some people have less. So it's something that people that have can do for the have-nots. Go ahead.
It doesn't have to be anything physical. It could just be empathy for another person.
It doesn't have to be
Feelings.
physical. Yes, you can
Just to
give.
relate.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
You can
connect.
give
But it's not
emotionally.
possessions.
Yeah,
No, absolutely. It's not only
It could be
possessions.
just how much someone needs to save them.
no, but I'm saying I'm going beyond that saying.
Right.
Just sitting next to somebody.
Yes, just-
Right, just right. And okay.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear what we're saying? We're saying some wise things. So empathy, being
Yes.
there. Good. Just being there for somebody, being there to listen.
Also, I think forbearance is another term that, or a trait that would help to define kindness.
Okay. Interesting. I like it. I think it's people in the kitchen, and that's not a bad idea. Or just shut the door and tell them we're studying next door, and they should be a little softer. So we are going to, those are not, none of what we've said is wrong. Some of it is, more of the and typical understandings. What Donna said is something that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the space for showing kindness by just being there. And then we're going to just talk about some innovative and novel definitions that Judaism brings to, and how Judaism redefines kindness and charity. So number one, one of the main ideas that we're going to talk about is how kindness is more than something that we do for others and something that we do for somebody who has less than us. It is actually the way that it might be the closest way that we can emulate and channel God. And we'll break that down in a moment. That is one of the, novel and innovative ways that we're going to define kindness today. And also how kindness is not a give-take relationship as much as it's a relationship where both parties play a crucial role, and a role that creates a world of justice and righteousness. Okay, so this whole course that we're doing this year at the Rosh Chodesh Society is called Well Connected, and we're talking about different mitzvot that define a Jewish way of life. So just to review a little bit of what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah, we've explained, is simply a divine commandment. So if God told us to do it, it's a mitzvah. It's typically a good deed, and sometimes translated as that, but that's just one part of what a mitzvah is. And the Kabbalistic meaning is that it is the act that connects us to God. It's like that rope that connects us to God. Every mitzvah is another strand that strengthens that rope. And a mitzvah is the act that connects us to God, and that keeps on strengthening our relationship to God. So today we're going to talk about the mitzvah. If there's one mitzvah that's the mitzvah, it's what we're going to talk about today, which is the act of kindness. And really, chesed, yes. And really, it's not one mitzvah. It is a series of mitzvahs. And they collectively fall under the category of chesed, kindness. So another way to say it is gmilut chasadim. Chasadim is the same root word as chesed, but we're just making a plural, chasadim, kindnesses. Chasidim, yes, but it's different.
It's exactly
It
that.
is, right?
Chassidus,
Chesed,
chassidus.
yes, good, same root word. And those are acts of kindness. So we're going to talk about first 3 forms of chesed. And like someone said at the very beginning, we're not only talking about sharing physical money, possessions, food. It is very warm here. I'm going to turn it down a little bit.
What? This is like comfy.
I turned it down and I turned it back up. Let's go down. Cool. There's various forms of chesed. We're going to talk about financial chesed, physical chesed, and spiritual chesed. Okay. So if you look in the student book, page 144, at figure 6.1, we are going to read the list, this table that just outlines some forms of chesed. So, Donna, can you see the screen? That Donna, this Donna, Zoom Donna.
Oh, yes, I can see it.
Okay, good. Can you? Yes, there's the Zoom Donna and IRL Donna. Zoom Donna, will you begin please with reading the forms of financial chesed?
Sure. Now I can see, but the very end of the
I see. Okay, let me try
lines.
to move my screen.
Yeah, move it over. Yeah.
Yes, nope. That better?
Better. I think I've got it all. Okay. This is the classic form of charity extended into financial assistance. This is the classic form of charity extended individually or through a communal charity fund. Feeding the hungry. The law is that when a person asks for financial assistance, it is prudent to investigate whether the need is genuine. But when a person says that they are hungry and asks for food, one must give immediately without further investigation. Giving a loan. A Talmudic maxim is that granting a loan is greater than charity, as charity is only for the poor, whereas a loan is for both the poor and the rich. See Jerusalem Talmud, page 11. Torah law mandates that loans to a fellow Jew must be interest-free. Redeeming captives. One of the highest forms of charity is to redeem someone from slavery or captivity. As a rule, funds raised for a specific purpose must be used for that purpose only. An exception to this rule is that all charitable funds can be used for redeeming captives.
Okay, thank you. So that is the most classic form of charity is financial assistance. And then this chart that Donna just read, it goes up in levels of sophistication or importance. So, giving somebody money, tzedakah, putting tzedakah in a tzedakah box is level 1, very obviously, very important, a very basic value. Feeding the hungry, somebody needs food. You're not even supposed to question or investigate if they're really hungry. Someone's asking for food, you are meant to give immediately. And then giving a loan, of course, is the next level of helping the poor and setting them up for future success. And the loan must be interest-free. And then redeeming captives is another way that we're meant to give charity. And the charity that is money that is given specifically to redeem somebody that's in slavery or captivity cannot be used for anything else. However, all charity could be used for redeeming captives. So those are 4 forms of financial chesed, financial kindness. Now we move on to physical chesed, which when we read it, we'll understand the difference between financial and physical. And Donna IRL,
Okay.
you're up.
How far are you?
Page 145.
145. So starting with physical chesed.
Physical chesed, yes.
Hospitality to guests. This mitzvah includes providing guests with food, drink, and lodging, making them feel welcome and at home, and accompanying them for a short distance when they leave. That's what's going to happen in the Shabbaton. Would you like me to continue?
Yes, please.
Visiting the sick. This mitzvah includes caring for the sick person and praying for them. The Talmud says that visiting the sick removes 1/60 of their illness.
Thank you. All right, one more, Donna.
Okay. Bringing happiness to bride and groom. It is a special mitzvah to help a single person find a spouse. I'm open to that mitzvah. And to participate in a wedding in order to increase the joy of bride and groom.
Okay, thank you. Adira, the last 2 physical chesed.
Right. Oh, here's a cute one. Honoring the deceased or comforting the mourner.
Honoring the deceased.
Oh, cool. Caring for the dead is called the true kindness. Gracious 47:29. Because one does not expect any reciprocation from the recipient. This mitzvah includes participating in a funeral to accompany the body on its final journey and helping to assure that it is given a proper and dignified burial. Accompanying the mourner. It is a mitzvah to visit a person who is mourning the passing of a loved one. It's also a mitzvah to speak about the positive qualities and good deeds of the deceased. Do you want me to go?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Finish the.
Returning a lost object to its owner.
Go. Yes.
The Torah,
Don't worry.
Devarim,
Yes.
the Deuteronomy Devarim, yes,
Mhm.
instructs that one who finds an object that has distinctive features by which its owner can identify, it is obligated to take it, publicize the find, and care for it until its owner claims it.
Good, and last one.
And roadside assistance. That's what we're going to talk about that one. If you see the donkey of your enemy kneeling under its load, shall you assist with him? According to one opinion in the Talmud, this was a source of the obligation to alleviate the suffering of an animal.
Nice. All right, I'm so sorry. What's your first name?
Jolie.
Jolie, right. Will you read spiritual chesed? Yes, swallow. Go ahead. Let me just scroll down. Yeah, go ahead.
Educating the young. Educating the young is not just a form of spiritual chesed, but also the key to the continuity with people. The sages said that we do not school children, even for the building of the holy temple. Teaching Torah. Notes that but a person's teacher grants them life in this world and life in the world to come.
Wow.
Encouraging, assisting a fellow to repent a wrongdoing or do a good deed. The commandment, love your fellow as yourself, implies that a person should not be satisfied with their own spiritual gains, but endeavor to achieve no less for their fellow.
Thank you. Okay, so there's the financial chesed, the physical chesed, and the spiritual chesed, and what we're going to talk about in the rest of the classes and delve into one example of each. So the next thing that we'll talk about is what I mentioned earlier, which is how we define chesed. Less about somebody that's being generous or donating or giving something that they have to somebody that has less, and rather seeing it as an opportunity to channel and emulate God. So what we're going to talk about right now, and we're going to look into the Talmud, is and read about how doing chesed, how does it work that it sounds lovely, you're emulating God and you're channeling God, but how does it work? Why is this such an opportunity to really be godlike, more than probably anything else? And so we are going to look into text 1, which is from the Talmud, Talmud Sota, and I will read text 1. I will scroll down so you can see it on the screen. Here it is. Okay. It is written, and after your God you shall walk. But is it possible to walk after the divine presence? Is it not already stated that your God is a consuming fire? So the Talmud's quoting from Devarim, from Deuteronomy, that it says you shall walk after God. I don't know why they wrote behind. I don't think it's a little behind. I think it means that you should follow God. And then the Talmud says, in a true Talmudic question, how can you follow God if God is in the sky, or he's a fire? Not because the fire is going to consume you, because you can go behind it and keep yourself from getting burnt, but God's not something that you can follow. So what are we being told when it's, what's the Torah saying when it says you should follow behind the divine presence? Good. His example. So then the Talmud continues, your God is consuming fire. But the meaning of this is follow God's behavior. So follow his example. As God clothes the naked, as it is written, God made for Abram and for his wife coats of skin, and he clothed them, so should you clothe the naked. God visits the sick, as it is written, God appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre, so you too should visit the sick. God comforts the mourners, as it is written, it was after the death of Abraham that God blessed Yitzchak his son. You too should comfort mourners. God buries the dead, as it is written, he buried Moses in the valley, so too you should bury the dead. So you all know the famous joke that, and actually it fits well here, right? A flood was raging. I'm sure you've heard this from Ari. There's no way you haven't. A flood is raging, right? Donna's nodding. The water is rising to the top of Joel's front porch, and his neighbor floats by in a little rowboat, and he calls, Joel, come, get in, and you hop in, we'll float off to safety. The water's rising. And Joel's like, no, I'm okay. All my life, I've trusted in God and not put my faith in the hands of a mere mortal. I'm waiting for God to save me. And so neighbor keeps rowing by, and 2 hours later, the first floor of his house is flooded, goes up to the second floor, and a motorboat chugs by, yells, come, hop in, and same response. And Joel insists that God alone will save him. Another hour passes. Joel's on the top of his roof, and the waters are rising, pouring, and a helicopter flies by. Joel waves the helicopter away. and says, don't worry, I'm waiting for God to save me. And unfortunately, Joel drowns. And his soul approaches the gates of heaven, and, he is kind of angry and mad. And he says, all my life, God, I relied on you and had so much faith in you. To the very end, I refused any help from humans. Where were you to save me? And so God, a voice calls out, Joel, a voice, I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter, and you rejected my help. So it's a classic Rabbi Ari joke. I'm not sure if it's in many classes, but over here, it really is kind of what really brings up the point of what we're trying to say. God's help comes sometimes miraculously, God's kindness, but every act of care that God gives us is his kindness. And when we help somebody in any way that God helps us, when we help somebody with food, and we help somebody with shelter, and we help somebody with clothing, and we help somebody with emotional support, we are channeling God. And when we visit the sick, when we dance at a wedding, so in all those instances, we're providing the love and support for that person, and God is kind of providing that support through us. God's acting through us, and he can go like the same way God acted through Joel's neighbor when he sent the first boat, and the same way God acted through Joel's other neighbor when he sent the second boat, and the same way God acted through the helicopter rescue team, right? God acts through us when we go and help somebody. So God never actually told the neighbor, get into a boat and go save your neighbor. But God is the one who directed that person to save, well, to at least give him the opportunity to be saved. So whenever we do something that is helping somebody else, and that is showing kindness to somebody else, that is really God just working through us indirectly or directly, now that we know. So we are making the choice. We think we're making the choice, but it's really God providing that care for our friend through us.
So we can't just rely on the celestial.
No, definitely not. Yes.
So I'm just wondering if you can maybe give more insights on text 1 when it says, with God is a consuming fire, because we studied that line in Overcoming Folly this past Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't clear on it then.
Okay. So I think in this lesson, it just, the point of it is to say, if God is something doesn't have a physical presence, he's a spiritual, godly presence. So we can call him things like fire, or how can you follow after something that doesn't have something that you can't follow? So that's really the context of it here. But an understanding the Kabbalistic meaning of God as fire is for Kabbalah and coffee. Here we're it's just to point out that God isn't anything that we can physically follow. So what is the Torah saying when he says follow God? If you can't follow God, he's everywhere. How can you follow God if he's everywhere?
God is in the rain.
Right. So that point is, like you said, be like God, and now we're explaining how we can be like God. So, and even there's a footnote here that when I read it, I didn't want to miss out from sharing it, because it was really beautiful. The footnote says, even in the case where for whatever reason a person needs to experience hardship, God's deepest desire is that we should step in and help them. And then the Talmud gives a parable, which again, I'm sharing because I thought it was beautiful, too good not to share. And I'll read it. It's written beautifully. This is the question that was posed by the wicked Turnus Rufus to Rabbi Akiva. If your God loves the poor, why does he not provide for them? I will illustrate with a parable. Suppose an earthly king was angry with his servant and put him in prison and ordered that he should be given no food or drink. And a man went and gave him food and drink. If the king heard, would he not be angry? So if the king put a servant in prison and ordered that he not be given food, if somebody snuck the servant food, the king would be very angry. Okay. Rabbi Akiva said, suppose an earthly king was angry with his child and put him in prison and ordered that no food or drink should be given to them. And someone went and gave them food and drink. If the king heard of it, would he not send this person a gift in appreciation? So the lesson was that even if God, for some reason, someone was not deserving, but was meant to experience a hardship, and ultimately it's for the good, but we don't always see that. And does God want us to stand by and let them experience that hardship, even because God was the one that, ordered that hardship? And so the answer is just like in that parable. Sorry. I have a Mac and an iPhone, and apparently they're connected. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Thank you. It's my son.
I'm not sure if it's just when something is done to someone else. It could be something done to, like that joke with the helicopter and the boats. I had that man's same mentality of Hashem put me in this situation. Hashem will get me
But
out.
what is Hashem getting you out? What would Hashem getting you out look like?
Well, I just waited. I was treated like dirt by my horrible roommate, and I figured Hashem wanted me here for a reason. I don't know what it is, but I trust Hashem. And if Hashem wanted me out of this roommate situation, Hashem will take me out. And he did. It took
Right.
6 to 7 months before I was out of it. But Hashem eventually rolled his eyes and said, all right, stupid, I'm gonna have to get you out myself because you're not doing anything.
What did he do?
He brought another girl into the program, and someone said, hey, would you like to move out and switch roommates? And I go, yeah, I would tell Hashem to bring something
Yeah.
in.
You wouldn't necessarily, well, maybe maybe I should say you would.
Of
If I
course.
work in healthcare, and I believe that healthcare, the things that were given to us because God said, we're gonna show you how to do these things, and then you can provide for other people. Rather than
I think you
just-
see it in healthcare. Like I just, in whatever my experience with healthcare, it's just like one of my kids was even in the NICU, and I remember watching through the windows, and I'm like, those nurses are God's angels. Like, I'm like, they are doing God's work. Well, how else can God himself is just, they're channeling God. And it's exactly what we're saying. Yeah, that's,
On the machine.
yep.
What I
Absolutely.
do for a living is I provide hearing for children. So deaf children get cochlear implants, and I turn them on. 8-month-old on Friday, 8-month-old baby got 2 implants, and she heard.
Oh my
And so,
gosh. I hope you're hearing this. This is
That's
phenomenal.
That's part of,
No, pun intended.
but I think
You see
just
it.
hoping that the deaf will be healed naturally is. I
No,
don't think
correct.
that-
That's not how God intended the
And,
world.
it's there, I guess Christian scientists believe that. They won't do anything, but that's not.
But Judaism doesn't. And that's
Judaism
But
believes
that
that.
also puts us in these situations.
right. And that's what we just read. God put you in the situation, but he also put others there to act on his behalf with kindness. And we'll read in a second, the world was built on kindness. There's this relationship where that's the way the world is supposed to run, where people are helping each other, and that's God's acting through them. And again, we'll analyze it a little bit more now. It's actually very cool. We're going to look at the dynamics of 2 Hebrew letters and understand from these 2 Hebrew letters the relationship between the giver and the receiver. Even though we're
And hey,
nope,
no,
Gimel and Daled. Hey, go ahead, Ray.
forget it.
So what I wanted to say, I couldn't tell if anyone said it because it's hard to hear.
Hey.
But there's a mitzvah for which the person can't thank you. And that is if you serve on the Chevra Kadisha and you prepare the person for burial. And that's, it's a beautiful mitzvah, I think.
So being on the Chevra Kadisha, being on the group of people that prepare a body for burial is called chesed, and it's actually called chesed shel emet. It's the ultimate chesed, because you cannot get anything back from that
So how do we
person.
do that? How can we
You
get that opportunity?
You contact the Chevra Kadisha and go through whatever
How?
training and
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Because I was just gonna ask about the Hebrides.
Yes,
I wanna
yes,
do
and
that
we're going
with
to talk
Jason.
about we're going to talk about comforting mourners, so it's a little different than the Chevra Kadisha, but the
wanna
chesed
do that
of
right
being
now.
on the Chevra Kadisha is chesed shel emes, the chesed shel emes, the ultimate chesed. But what we were just saying, I just want to kind of clarify this point of tzedakah, when you translate tzedakah, typically people will say charity. And if
Righteous.
you look- correct. And if you look at the Hebrew word of tzedakah, it actually does not mean charity. I don't know what charity means. It means tzedek. Tzedek is righteousness or justice. And that's what, Jolie, what you were saying, which is, that is when you do tzedakah, you create the justice, you bring that justice, you partner with God in creating a just world. And a child that was born without the ability to hear, and we don't say, well, that's how God created them and we're not supposed to do anything. We're just supposed to let it be. God created this world where there is the human ability to kind of be part of that, the creation of justice and righteousness for this child, and to give them the ability to hear. And that's something that Jolie over here is part of, and it's a beautiful example of God created the world with us, and God are partners in creating the righteousness and the justice that is meant to be. And therefore we do the tzedakah because we're obligated to bring justice to the world and to bring righteousness to the world. Okay, so now let's look at the Gimel and the Daled and understand the relationship between the giver of tzedakah and the receiver of tzedakah. So charity, tzedakah, of course, is, it's universal. Every society has accepted it. But we have a different understanding of it. The Jewish idea is that it is it's not an optional act of generosity, or, you're not being generous or we're using the word kindness, but I think, you're not donation, and you are doing what is right and what is just. And we are, as we said, God is acting through us. So, before we look at the Gimel and the Dalet, actually, and just to finish off this point, text 3, which is on the screen, do not say to you, is from, you can read where it's from, Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher. He said, do not say to yourself, why should I reduce my wealth by giving to the poor? Know that the money is not yours, but a deposit to do with as the depositor wishes. And this is God's will, that you dispense it to those who are poorer than you. So, you don't see wealth as something that of course, if you worked for it, and you don't dismiss that it's your hard, that you worked hard for it, but then you would feel lucky to be the one that God chose to have to give. But you're just God's, you are acting as God's banker and distributing the wealth where God wants it to be. And you can just be thankful that was the role that you were chosen in that relationship. But really it's God's money that you were given to share appropriately. Okay, now we are going to look at the relationship between giver and receiver by looking at 2 Hebrew letters, Gimel and Dalet. And if you look in your student textbook or on the screen, it's on page 150. Did I say that? 150, yes. Right? Okay, so all the Hebrew letters have significance, and the 2 that we're looking at today are Gimel and Dalet. There's a fascinating passage in the Talmud that discusses the significance of all the Hebrew letters. Another great class, not now, but the letters Gimel and Dalet are interpreted as models for the dynamics of tzedakah. Ouch.
Oh my gosh.
Are you cut?
My bad.
I would not. Can you not touch it, please?
Can I replace it?
Can you put it down? Thank you. Can you not get? Just careful, because it might be glass. We just broke a glass.
What
Sign
do you
of-
mean we? The clumsy one.
We did.
Plastic,
We're a
put it in the
team.
cup.
I think we need a paper
Put
bag.
it in the cup first.
Oh yeah, put it in a paper cup. Are you cut?
No, not yet.
Okay. Honey, can you move to a different spot so you don't touch the table and get, God forbid, a little glass splinter?
No, I just have glass on the hand.
Okay, so go wash it off. Move over to a different spot.
Yes, mother.
Thank you, dear.
Bring that up so no one else gets
We'll
hurt.
clean it up at the end. Well, no one's going to touch it right now. We'll put it in a paper bag at the end. Okay, So Gimel and Daled are the two letters. And if you look at the Gimel and the Daled, and just a reminder that Hebrew works from right to left, the word Gimel means to give, right? We said at the beginning, Gomel, Gemilot Chasadim. It means give or grant. And the word Daled,
Like benching Gomel?
yes, and same root. And the word Daled means someone needy or impoverished. And we're going to look in the text in a second. So the Gimel Daled represent that relationship between giver and receiver, between the giver of Chesed and its beneficiary. And according to the Talmud, the formation of the letters actually teaches us a few distinct lessons about this relationship. So look at text 5. I love this. It's really cool.
Clarification.
Yes.
So Gimel is how you describe a letter, but it also is a word of its own.
Gimel, well, Gimel Gomel. Yes, Gimel is the name of the letter. And if you look at the text that we're about to look at in text 5 on page 151, the first few words of it in Hebrew, Gimel Daled. So it says the names of the two letters, Gimel Daled, Gimel Dalim. That's what it's like, kind of the Gimel stands for Gimel, and it's the same root, the same Hebrew letters, Gimel, Gimel. Dalim is very similar word to the letter Daled, and it means, so Gimel means giving, Dalim means needy, give to the needy. So the letters Gimel and Daled represent the phrase Gimel Dalim, give to the needy. Okay. Sarah, can you unmute and read? Getting tired of listening to myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you just finished give to the needy. So should I go to
We'll start that one again and we'll just flow.
Okay.
Thank
The
you.
letters Gimel and Daled represent the phrase Gimel Dalim, give to the needy. Why is an appendage of the Gimel extended toward the Dalet? Because it is the way of the giver to pursue the needy. Why is an appendage of the Dalet extended toward the Gimel? Because the recipient should make themselves available to the giver. And why is the face of the Dalet turned away from the Gimel? Because the giver should give in secret, lest the recipient be ashamed.
Okay, thank you. So if you look back at the Gimel Dalet, I think there's another picture over here in 6.3. It says, why does the Gimel have this leg?
Hi, Audrey, how are you?
Leg, you just mute somebody. There we go. Why does the Gimel have a leg extending towards the Dalet? And the reason for that is because the giver is supposed to be proactive in this relationship. And why does the Dalet, let me see if it has another picture. Why does the Dalet extend a little bit backwards? And that is because the receiver is supposed to make themselves to a certain extent available to the giver. And even though if you look at it, even though it extends kind of backwards a little bit in that little circled spot, the Dalet, the opening of the Dalet is facing the other direction. So there is some sort of, you're not making the receiver kind of look you in the eye and take from you. You're offering them that anonymity, that privacy, and that relationship is respect. It's a very respectful giving.
And sometimes we are, at a given time, it can either be a Gimel or a Dalet.
Yes, right. You're not always the Gimel or always the Dalet, exactly, of course, because sometimes it's financial and you might not be able to give, and sometimes it's emotional and you might be, and spiritual giving and all these different things. We're going to talk soon about comforting somebody who's mourning. That's, you can be the giver because you're visiting somebody who's in mourning, and you can unfortunately be the receiver because somebody passed and now you're, God forbid, sitting Shiva. So the first lesson from the Gimel is that its leg extends forward, and it is showing that the giver should pursue opportunities to give tzedakah. So typically when you're, there's the typical, like, you're just doing you're going through your daily drive and you wait for somebody to come up to your window, or you're going through your daily doing your work, and if you receive a request for tzedakah, you receive a request for a donation, then you might look into it and consider giving. But typically, how often do you pursue those opportunities to give? So the first lesson from here is that there's a mitzvah to give, and you're supposed to go and proactively look for opportunities to give. And actually there's the word that the Torah uses in general about mitzvahs is in Hebrew, osek, to occupy yourself. You're supposed to occupy yourself with Torah, learning Torah. You're supposed to occupy yourself with doing mitzvot, like chesed, like tzedakah. And the word osek also means engage in business. And so the interpretation is that just like if imagine somebody has a product that they sell and they sit back and they think like, well, I have a great product with a good price tag.
Doesn't sell itself.
I'm just gonna, right. Donna says it doesn't sell itself. So why should this person thinks of great product, great price? Why should I go out chasing people, right? If someone wants it, they can come to me and I'll be happy to do business. So obviously that's not how a business person would think because they won't make any serious business. As a serious business person who wants to sell their product, that you'll only succeed if you proactively look for opportunities for sales. So the same attitude is supposed to be osek b'Torah uva mitzvot. You're supposed to occupy yourself in the same way with Torah and mitzvahs, that you're not just, I'm at my desk, if someone asks me for tzedakah today, I'll donate. Rather proactively go out and look for ways to pursue chesed. So that's the gimel with that's the lesson from the gimel kind of with its leg. It's in that like, that emoji of someone like running? It kind of looks like a gimel. It's like the leg is forward because it's running forward. Okay, so that is the gimel. That's one lesson from the shapes of the letters. Ray, I need to unmute you so you can ask your question. Ray, we don't hear you. Can you unmute? I'm not there. Go ahead.
So according to Maimonides' levels of giving tzedakah, the next to the highest level of giving tzedakah is to give to someone that you don't know and that they don't know you. That's the next to the highest. That very highest being, of course, is to give some the opportunity to have a job so that they don't need to accept tzedakah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. So now, okay, thank you. That is beautiful. And so until now, we're talking about the role of the gimel, and we looked at the letter and we learned that the gimel is supposed to pursue the opportunities for giving. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the recipient and what when we look at the daled, what we learn about the recipient. And if we look at text 6, this is another beautiful, very profound. I think I went text 6. I went too far. Text 6. Deborah, can you read text 6, please?
More than the benefactor does for the pauper does for the benefactor.
Thank you. So we take also again a different perspective, a Jewish perspective, that it's a relationship where both people have a important role. And if you think about it, and typically the giver gets all the glory, they get all the respect, they get the name on the building, and the receiver typically feels inadequate and shame. So it's not just, God could have just as easily made it the other way around, or created a world where everyone was self-sufficient and nobody needed anything from anybody else. But yet God wanted a world where kindness and chesed was happening constantly, and there was this relationship between giver and receiver, and that way the people in the world mirror God. So yes, God could have easily created a world where none of this was needed and nobody needed anybody else, but he wanted a world where people among themselves created this sense of righteousness and justice by channeling God and by making sure that there was constantly kindness and giving happening. And so that if you look at the daled, you see how the little thing on its shoulder protrudes backwards, showing that the recipient should be open to receiving, because we all know that some people more than others have a hard time with needing somebody else's help. for whatever kind of help it is. And, you know, we don't want to feel like we need somebody else. We don't want to feel inferior. We don't want to feel like anything like that. But both the giver and the receiver are offering something to the other. They both have, in a sense, equal role. And that's why that little piece extends over its shoulder, to show that there's a two-way stream. Yes.
It kind of looks like Donald is like running away from the gimel and has his back turned.
Well, it does have its back to the gimel, because that's what we're going to talk about. What Ray just said, we're going to talk about the value of giving anonymously, just for the, you know, but it's also, the Dalet's very open.
But not towards the gimel.
Right. So it's still open,
To
but
pay it
it's back.
forward.
Right. So, and then we're going to continue looking at that shape of the Dalet. So, the third part of it is we talked about giving. The gimel is pursuing. The gimel is proactive. The Dalet is allowing itself and being open to receiving. However, the third piece of it is giving with dignity. And that's why the Dalet is got its back to the gimel, even though it's very open on the other side, it's still got its back to the gimel. So it's not a close. There's some letters that are closed, that are just completely closed or mostly closed. It's not a mostly closed letter. It's an open letter, but its back is to the giver. So notwithstanding the importance of the role and the relationship and being a receiver, and how you know, that's the way God created the world, and that's the way he wanted the world to run, with this giving receiving relationship. However, as Ray said, Maimonides still gives us 8 levels of giving tzedakah, and it starts from a person giving not enough, so inadequately and unwillingly. So that would be the lowest level. Like someone still gave tzedakah to somebody else, but it wasn't enough, and they were giving unwillingly and unhappily. So that would be the lowest level. And as it works its way up, they present, each level up represents a greater level of sensitivity and dignity. To the final, the highest level is where you actually give somebody the opportunity to work. And so now they don't need any charity, they can provide for themselves. So that's the greatest dignity that you can give somebody. But every level, as it works its way up, is, you know, a little bit more dignity, a little bit more anonymity. So the giver goes up to the next level is when the giver doesn't know who gave it to them. And it preserves their dignity. And this is demonstrated in the shape of the Dalet. So they're still getting, but the Gimel made sure to give it in a way that the Dalet's dignity was maintained, whether it was, you know, and dropped something off out if they needed clothing or food, you know, kind of dropped it off on the porch, or sent anonymous money, whatever it is, and whatever the case is, the Gimel, the giver, was very sensitive to the Dalet, so that the Dalet wouldn't feel any shame or any inadequacy. And that is, that's, you know, the second to highest level of giving, and the highest is, as we said, giving a job.
Well, I mean, about donating blood, that's kind of that's kind of like the poster child of anonymity. You don't know who receives
Right, you don't know
it,
whose blood
and you
you
don't know
receive,
who's
correct.
giving it, but it's an essential
life-saving.
need. You're giving to someone else who needs it.
Beautiful. Okay, so that is a little understanding about the relationship between the giver and the receiver, looking at the letters Gimel and Dalet. Gimel is the giver, Dalet is the Dal, the needy, the poor. And we're going to move on to an example of emotional giving, comforting the mourner. So as with charity, the act of visiting somebody who has suffered a loss and offering them consolation is not just limited to the Jewish community. It is something that everybody does. However, the Judaism brings a very unique approach and a unique value and kind of set of etiquette to this form of chesed. And it starts off with Shulchan Aruch, which is the Code of Jewish Law, and text 7. So the Code of Jewish Law actually gives us kind of etiquette for comforting somebody who is mourning. Joy, will you read us text 7, please?
The comforters should not open the conversation until the mourner opens first.
Okay, so first rule of etiquette is when you go for visiting somebody who is in mourning, is you go to a shiva house or whatever it is, you go to somebody who's just suffered a loss, and you are supposed to wait in silence and comfort in silence until they begin the conversation. And the reason for this law is because some people feel like when they go to, comfort somebody in mourning, their role is to entertain and to bring some humor and joy and lightness to the atmosphere and dispel the gloominess and the sadness, and that might help the mourner forget their pain. And the Jewish approach is that that's not your job. You're not coming to entertain. You're not coming to help them forget for a couple of minutes. You're coming to help them grieve. And everybody grieves differently. And you don't know how that person grieves until you wait quietly and let them start the conversation. And based on what they say is where you'll go with the comfort. And sometimes it might just be sitting there in silence and just sitting beside them. That's what you were saying before. Like sometimes people don't want to talk and they don't want to be spoken to. They just want to sit in their grief. And if you're sitting there beside them, that's how you're comforting them. So the first rule is, everyone is processing their tragedy differently. Some might want to talk about their loss, some might not. So you don't know how to proceed unless they begin the conversation. And so the rule is that you wait quietly until the mourner speaks first. Okay. When we do speak, what do we say? So, what is there to say to comfort somebody? And so there are actually traditional words, and even if, you don't have to wait for them to say this. When you walk into somebody's home, after a funeral, or if you go into a shiva house, you say these words, and then after that, you would just kind of not say much more unless they continue the conversation. But there's traditional verse that you do say, and it gives you something to say, because otherwise you don't know what to say. So we just talked about not taking on any I'm going to make jokes, I'm going to tell a story, I'm going to taking on any sort of I'm going to bring something to the atmosphere. But then, and sometimes you do just sit quietly, but even when you sit quietly, there is a traditional verse, it's a one sentence verse that you're supposed to say when you approach somebody that is grieving. And the verse is, Hamakom yenachem etchem b'toch sha'ar avelei Sion v'Yerushalayim. May God console you among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem.
Is that just passing?
Yes, it's just for
I thought it was
passing.
Baruch Dayan Ha'emes.
Well, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet is something that you say good. So Atira just asked what she thought it was Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. So Baruch Dayan Ha'emet is something that you say when you hear bad news. So when you hear of someone passing, the first thing that you do is bless God, who is the eternal judge, or the judge of truth. So, you heard something tragic, and it's kind of it trains you, instead of saying oh my gosh, how could God do that? You just Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, God knows what he's the eternal judge of truth, and we don't understand his ways and why somebody passed, especially if it was untimely. But the words that come out of our mouth are Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. And they are somewhat comforting, but this is when you talk to somebody that is themselves in mourning. So they're sitting shiva. You go to a shiva house, you walk up to the person, you're there for the service, then you want to approach them and say something. But the Jewish law is, you don't want to start a conversation or make a joke, or you don't have that right until they've kind of said. If you sit around with them and they're telling jokes, they're telling stories, then sure, follow their lead. But what do you say? And so you're not supposed to say anything, but the Torah then gives us this text for comforting mourners, and it's one sentence, Hamakom, and we're going to look at the messaging. What is the subtle messaging of this verse that is so comforting? Jerusalem.
Yeah, but
so the Rebbe wrote a letter. The Rebbe wrote a letter to Arik Sharon, after the death of his son. And he explained in this letter this verse and why we say it and what's so comforting about it. And I'm just going to kind of go quickly through it. There's 2 points that he shares in this letter. And if you want to read text 9a and 9b, It's from the letter, it's the text of the letter that the Rebbe wrote to Ariel Sharon after the death of his son, but I'll just give you a summary. The summary is that the traditional words of consolation, Hamakom Yinachem Eschem Besoch Sha'ar Tzion Yerushalayim, which we just read, may God comfort you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, have 2 points of consolation. One is that the entire Jewish people participates in mourning an individual's loss. So you're not mourning on your own. And I think of how powerful that is. You're saying one short verse to them, but it's got 2 messages. One is that you're not mourning on your own. The entire Jewish community is mourning with you. So, you're at a loss of words, and how powerful is it to say to somebody, you're not on your own. I'm with you. And the entire Jewish community is with you in mourning. And really that the counter part of that is the other side of that coin is your grief is shared by the community, and that makes it so much more bearable, and how valuable that person, that person wasn't just an individual, they were a part of a community. And so, it can be very comforting. And the second message in that verse is what the Rebbe explains. In regard to Zion and Jerusalem, the Romans and before them the Babylonians were only able to vanquish the wood and stone and silver. Oh, why does it reference Jerusalem? Because just like when the temple was destroyed, so it says that only the physical gold and silver and stone of the temple was destroyed, but the spirit and the spirituality in that space was never destroyed. So this verse references the Jerusalem, because just like the spirituality of Jerusalem was never destroyed even when the physical temple was destroyed. So when somebody passes, only their physical body passes, and only their physical body is affected by the death, and the spiritual relationship and their spiritual presence and the spiritual goodness that they brought to the world through their good deeds does not depart. That remains forever. So you're kind of giving this to
The soul goes up.
the soul. The soul goes up. The soul goes through this process of returning to God, but the spiritual impact and the good deeds that the person brought, and the opportunities to stay connected to it doesn't make a difference where the soul is in terms of being connected to it. Can be a step away or can be up there. That your connection to that soul isn't affected by distance. So the body is affected by death, but the spirit and the spiritual relationship and the good deeds that person brought to the world do not depart. So this short phrase of
The spiritual good deeds remain.
Yeah.
In the earth.
Correct. And yes, and you get to continue, especially if you continue those in the same path of those same good deeds, or you do good deeds in that person's memory, you're just keeping their presence.
So let's say
felt.
a person has no
No.
kin or whatever, so the person departs and has done lots of good deeds. But there's,
Actually, there's
so
a
what
couple.
would that, so those good deeds you say,
Would remain, the spiritual impact would remain, and it's that person's friends and people, that acquaintances would, could stay connected. No one would be sitting shiva because no one's.
That's what's.
But
Somebody dies
it still
alone.
doesn't mean that their spiritual impact is not departs. Spiritual impact. So the comfort that we give and we offer in this very short verse is, you're not alone. The entire community is mourning with you, and the departed isn't really departed, just physically they've departed and spiritually they haven't. And I want to wrap up. So the last point that the class talks about is one more act of chesed, which is hosting guests. And yes, and it uses the example of Abraham, who was talking to God. So Abraham had a Brit Milah at the age of 99, and God visited him. He was sitting outside his tent in the sun, healing from his Brit and from his bris, and he was talking to God, and he saw some guests approaching, and he just, God, give me a sec, give me a moment, I'll be right back. And he went to welcome the guests and to give them food and drink and rest. And so the Talmud, in the Talmudic style, says, what was Avram doing? How did he, God, 1 second, I'm going to go welcome these guests. And so we understand from that story that hosting and welcoming guests is more important than talking to God. But then the Gemara continues, how did Abraham know this? If he was the first one to do this, how did he know to do this? And so we'll conclude with this text 11, which is how Abraham knew. Has anybody not read for us this evening? Joy, will you read text 11, please?
Abraham's conduct can be explained with the following parable. A businessman pays a visit to one of his stores. The manager greets him with great deference, seats him comfortably in his office, and begins to tell him about the branch, the state of its merchandise, and so on. Just then, a few strangers enter the store, so the manager says to the owner, "Excuse me, sir, while I go tend to my customers," and rushes off to serve them. Is he not doing exactly what the owner wants him to do?
Good. So nice, right? God, obviously, the story of Avram's hospitality illustrates the idea that taking guests is greater than receiving God's presence, because actually taking in guests is actualizing God's presence in the world rather than just kind of having a side conversation. It's actually, would you rather talk to God or be God? Would you rather have a conversation with God or channel God? So back to bringing it full circle, because when you're doing chesed, you're channeling God. It was obvious to Abraham that talking to God was secondary to channeling God and actualizing God in this world by bringing in guests into his home. And the Torah gives us, the Jewish law gives us specifics of what hosting guests should look like. And the one interesting rule or law about hosting guests is that besides for feeding and making them comfortable and everything that you do inside your home to take care of a guest, you're supposed to escort them to the door and even beyond. And the reason is because just that escorting them beyond your everything that you do inside your house, you might be doing inside your property or home, you might be doing to be a good hostess, to be the perfect, you want to have the beautiful, perfect hosting, and you have the little like mint on the pillow and the towel and the water bottle, and you have the beautiful meal, and you make your guests so comfortable. And now you've taken care of somebody and you've done all this chesed, but you've also made sure that everybody knows that you're the perfect hostess. So to make sure that you're doing it completely for the sake of the guests and not for looking good, you escort them beyond your door. And that act of going beyond your house, your home, and your property shows how everything you did was not for anything selfish and for yourself, but really to help and care for.
So that's why you walk them to the bottom of the driveway.
That is why you walk them to the bottom of the driveway, and the further you walk them, the better. Obviously, you don't have to walk them beyond your home, but the concept is just by walking them to the door and beyond, you are you're showing that all of that kindness that you offered them and you extended to them, even in your own home, was not selfish at all, but it was to show kindness and care to another. And with that, we will conclude.
Can I bring us back to the beginning? So
Yes.
how are we to view, I mean, not just your particular situation about, but situations like that. So how are we with Kesed supposed to think of or view, the person that did it or something?
Right. So that's a good question. We're bringing it all the way back to the beginning, where my family experienced, the kindness of the community, but also theft. And so, and I'm putting this out there because I'd love to hear thoughts on what we can do to kind of give ourselves that perspective and not have negative. I mean, I kind of do have some negative thoughts, but not to focus on the
There's a kindness
act, the negative
to them.
act that was done to us.
There is a kindness you could do that you may not think of.
Yeah.
It's the emotional kindness of compassion. Here is someone who's so desperate that they're willing to take something that they don't even know what it is or the value of it. They're just taking it because they have a sensation
Right. So
of
it's kind of
desperation.
extending understanding to that.
Compassion is in itself is a kind of chesed, possibly.
Right. Yes, true. Any thoughts on how we can have chesed even towards somebody who
Does harm. Potentially.
I think the compassion was a good one, kind of just reminding ourselves that they're obviously struggling and suffering through something on their own, which is what cause atira.
I'm cleaning up.
No, you can't clean up glass like that. All right, if you'd like, you can read through the key points just as a summary. They're here on the screen. I'm not going to read them. If you have the book, if you have the student book, there's always really good articles at the end, additional reading. So I encourage reading those. I'm going to play a video of the Rebbe, and it's a compilation of just different stories where the Rebbe just showed incredible kindness to people. And the first story is people in Dakar, Africa. The Rebbe found them, found somebody to send somebody to seek out 4 Jewish families in Dakar, Africa, and sent them matzah for Pesach. So I'm going to share that video while we clean up. You're welcome to stay on or hop off. I'm going to stop my share screen, pull up the video, and then reshare. Yeah, so give me a moment. To link this. I'm just pulling it up, sorry. Share sound. Share.
In the Haggadah it is written, Ilachua anyo de'achol avosona biara b'Mitzrayim. This is the same bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Since the year 2448, after the world's creation, the children of Israel in all generations, whatever land they may be, fulfill the sacred mitzvah of eating the handmade shmura matzah during the Seder nights in each and every year.
In the first years that the Rebbe was Rebbe, I tell the Rebbe I'm going to South Africa. The Rebbe says, are you stopping on the way for a day or two? I says, I'm going with Pan American direct. You don't have to change planes. I said, again, don't you stop on the way for a day or two? Came home, I told my wife that if she don't get a telegram from me that I arrived safely, she shouldn't worry. We came to Dakar, the pilot came out and says, engine trouble. How long would it take? Not less than 48.
So just because I've flown this route to Africa, to South Africa via Dakar, the plane cannot fly, the planes can't take off on a full engine of fuel. So they stop and they refuel, but nobody even you stay on the plane. It's just you stop, you land in Dakar for a couple of hours, the plane refuels. And so it's called a direct flight, even though it has to refuel. But the Rebbe said to him, like, are you stopping? Aren't you stopping? Aren't you? Kept asking, aren't you stopping for a day or two? And he's like, this flight isn't supposed to stop. It's not considered a stop. And it turns out that when they stopped to refuel in Dakar, they had to wait 2 days because there was some engine trouble. And that's how Rabbi Weinberg found Jews in Dakar.
I go down and just across the street, there's a store that belongs to a Jew. Clement Politi is the name. As are there any other Eden? There's 4 families we know. Plane was fixed in time, and before he took me to the airport, he said, Rabbi, you will never know what those 2 days meant for me. I came and wrote a letter to the Rebbe. For Pesach, Rabbi Chadakov calls me and asks how long it takes the package to reach Dakar. The Rebbe wants to send matzah for the people, know they should be there in time. It has to be by airmail.
Wenn noch da ist bei ihm, was hat noch nicht, den Linien von Matzah Schmure. Oder hat und weiß nicht, der Gebel hat ihn nicht bedauert. Sie ein Mann, sie eine Frau, sie ein Kind, sie ein Erwachsene. Bis wie Wasser. Und wie Wasser meint man dabei, Kohle und Kuhle, in der Liebe von jeder Rippen, wie die Gmorde sagt, Chaie, oder Lehmer, geschrieben, liebe Leute. So liegt das nach hier, wer soll wissen sein, als der hat der Scheich, ganze Welt, wie great the Organisation.
I like it, but it's long and I don't want to.
After Pesach,
I am a tanner. Then the mother, the last, I have to take the train and go to the East Bronx. I come there. He opens the door, no shirt,
Yeah, I guess.
some tattoo.
I'm gonna put it into a follow. I'm gonna ask Barry to put it into a follow-up email so everybody can watch it and jump around on their own. Stop share. But that is it. Thank you everyone for joining. Unmute. You can all unmute yourselves. I'm not sure what you're doing.
Thank you. It was a very enjoyable class. Thank you so much.
So nice to see you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Susan. So,
Thank you very much. Enjoyed the class as always.
all right, L'chaim.
This is
So what's it?
to replace the glass that I broke.
Oh, you can put it in your tzedakah box. It could be your first. Your first tzedakah. L'chaim, everyone. Good night.
Good
night.